Right, we are live. I'm with Sarah, I'm with Andy, I'm with Claire, who I will introduce in just a second. Andy gives us a wave. No guesses where he is over his head there. The rest of us are at home. So for everyone that's joining, thank you for registering. If you could just drop us a like or just a comment just to let us know that you can hear us all okay. Just important that we make sure the audio is all working efficiently before we kick off. So for everyone that's jumped in straight away and that's joining, if you could just drop us a little yes, we can hear you in the comments, that would be super. And then I'm just going to go through first and foremost, before we go to the room, before we go to the experts, just to give you a little bit of an update on exactly what is happening with the property market as we stand. Believe it or not, we've got 1 day left of February, and then it's 10 months until 2026. So we're basically on the Christmas countdown now, which is scary in itself. Elena's saying, yes, I can hear you. So thank you for that. Always good to know. So I'll dive in with the update. So you'll see the ticker at the bottom. That's giving you a little bit of an update. So we have seen over the last month, according to Zoopla, a 1.9% average house price growth on prices, that is. So it's showing January through to now that prices on the listed price that properties are coming to the market is just in line with inflation, but that's in a month, not across a year. So pretty strong from that perspective. The big talking point on a lot of the reports over the last 4 or 5 weeks is that the amount of flats that are being listed has gone up massively over the last couple of weeks, even, shall we say. So there's been a huge increase in the amount of flats going up for sale by 14%. When you compare that to houses, just an increase of 5%. I haven't got it on the ticker, but I do know that the statistics on demand to combat that is there's been a 16% increase in demand for houses and a 1% increase in demand for flats. So that's quite interesting in itself. It does mean that if you are looking to sell a flat, just be aware it is quite competitive. And although there is slightly more demand for them than what there was this time last year, it's still the houses where people are searching. So you're going to have to be quite competitive, especially in the block and in the area, to get those under offer. But I would advise getting them sold and getting into the housing market if you can. Over the last 5 years, the average house price growth has been 24%. So basically a quarter gain on house prices. So if you've owned your property for the last 5 years, show of hands, Claire, Andy, Sarah, last 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple in the room. Yeah, so that's what's happened with those. Flats over the same period have grown 7%. So you have seen with leasehold properties over the 7% over the same period, which is good. Overall buyer demand is up 11% and sales agreed are up 10% year on year as well. Marta, good evening to you. Thank you for saying hello. For those that are listening, because there's a few extras that have just joined, thank you for joining us this evening. The update is below. This is a live Q&A. You can interrupt us at any time with any question. No topic is off bars. I will put them all live on the screen. So you ask us a question, we will discuss it. It's a private chat. This is not going out to the whole of social media. So if you're really passionate about it and you want to swear, I don't mind. You can put down comments as well. Andy won't mind it either. No. So first of all, Claire. So Claire is from Soteria Planning, and the Soteria Planning business industry is estate planning, wills, trusts, LPAs, and probates. How is that industry, Claire? We'll talk about some of the changes from the most recent budget that's coming up, but how is the industry at the moment, start of 25?
Yeah, it's busy. I think because of the budget update, lots more people are thinking more about wills and estate planning and making sure their affairs are in order, or just getting some advice because there's so much misinformation out there. Everyone's got a different opinion. So I think people are a lot more conscious about this topic and are looking to get advice from the right people, which is a good thing.
Yeah, love that. Andy, talking lettings. So Andy is our lettings director. Just as an FYI, my computer has just turned into an aeroplane. So if you lose me, I'll be back on. You guys just carry on. But it's done this before and then it's just totally shut off. So I'm just giving you the heads up. Andy, how is the lettings market start of 2025?
Good. Never a dull moment in lettings. But look, it's been good. Rental prices increasing, tenant demand still there, supply increased, believe it or not, and compared to this time last year, yields increasing, better buy-to-let mortgage rates out there as well. The hefty fees that are associated with them are coming down compared to last year. So look, it's all positive stuff from what I can see. There's one thing out there that potentially is coming in later this year, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a bit. But no, it's all positive stuff. It's still got its place, lettings, and good returns on there as well.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. I did notice that when Tom from Mortgage Tribe, that was on last month, put the headline rates through, the buy-to-let rates are still cheaper than the residential rates. So that's always quite interesting. I know it doesn't please the first-time buyers out there and the people that are looking to remortgage, but although you'll pay a whopping fee sometimes for the arrangement of a buy-to-let mortgage, it's quite interesting that still the headline rates on those are quite cheap. So the banks want landlords and property investors to be buying, which is interesting. And I think if anyone's a tenant out there, you'll be very aware that it's a difficult market. It's a scarce market. So we need more buy-to-lets available because it's the prices for rental is still out of control. Sarah, talk to me about yourself and Georgina. How has the business started this year? You guys are obviously operating in the Berkshire area as mums in business. Love to see that. Always love to see your videos, with things going on as well. But how is property?
Yeah, it's been a really busy start to the year, actually. We have found an awful lot of people that are upsizing. So a lot of families that have been moving, which has been great because a lot of buyers have been first-time buyers. We found, I know as a group, there was an 103% sale ratio for the start of the year. So yeah, it's been a really, really strong start.
And just to give context to that, for people that don't understand how that's possible, effectively what it means is the amount of properties listed for Avocado to the amount of properties sold. And obviously we go into the year as estate agents with stock existing. So it skews the metric slightly, but in the amount of properties that have come for sale compared to under offer, 103%, which normally that sits around 70 odd percent. I don't know if you've got the national average stat, have you, Sarah?
I think it was 71%, the national average.
There you go. So shows a really positive kind of property market. So yeah, don't forget live Q&A. So if you've got questions and you want to chuck them into the chat, then we would love to answer them as well. We have got a few questions that came in from people that wanted to ask them prior. So I think the first thing to talk about is the stat bomb that someone shared with us, which is really interesting. This is a question for you more, Claire, or a statement for you to put some context to. And I'll just remove the ticker while we do that. So the stat bomb is from a survey. 54% of UK adults are planning to adjust their retirement or estate planning now as a result of the government inheritance tax changes to pensions. And people will have seen that as an abbreviation sometimes as well. But talk to us about that. What does that mean for people that maybe are not aware?
Yeah, so just for context of what that actually is, up until now, generally pensions were kept outside of a person's estate and weren't subject to inheritance tax. So for a lot of people, they were using their pensions as a tax planning tool, taking money out of their estate and putting it into their pension for generational wealth planning. Since the budget, it was announced that from April 2027, any pensions would now be coming into the estate for inheritance tax purposes. Now, this is going to make a huge difference to a lot of people who have quite hefty pensions that before weren't subject to inheritance tax and now are. And that's got sort of wider implications to other exemptions and reliefs and all of that sort of thing. So it's a major impact on people's estates. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, with property prices increasing as well, more and more people are now falling into the inheritance tax bracket that didn't beforehand. And as I say, because people were using pensions as an inheritance tax tool, that's no longer applicable. So people are looking what other strategies are available for inheritance tax planning. What can I do to try and keep my inheritance tax liability as low as possible? Because ultimately we spend our whole life working and building up our wealth that we want to pass it down to future generations. It's not so much people looking for tax avoidance schemes, because that's not the purpose, but there are ways that we can structure estates, that we can use trust planning and all of those sorts of things to try and keep that liability to an absolute minimum and make sure people aren't paying more inheritance tax than is necessary. So it doesn't surprise me that lots more people are thinking about retirement planning, that are thinking about estate planning, given that these changes are going to come into play in 2027. We're still not entirely sure how it's all going to work, but certainly it's now putting that subject to the forefront of people's minds a lot more to make sure that, you know, they can pass on that wealth to children, grandchildren, rather than handing that over to the taxman.
Because I think it's the generation, like our parents, if you like, our parents' generation from this call, for the people that are kind of, I guess, mid-30s to sort of 50s, the generation above that, very strong on their pension planning typically. So there's some big, hefty pensions. And the bulk of those properties that they own now are mortgage-free kind of cash assets. So those brackets, it makes a big difference to them, but also our generation, that middle generation of kind of millennials, if you like, because it's the tax that obviously we will be paying on the estate, or the inheritors will pay on that. So yeah, definitely a topic. But I just think all people should be having a 2025 update with an estate planner, like a review of your wills, what's going to happen with the pension aspect of things, some bit of financial planning involved as well. And just get that knowledge, really. I think it's probably a good idea. So have a chat with Claire and the team at Soteria Planning, because I do think it's well worth that conversation. It can be done on Zoom or face to face. So yeah, really interesting stuff there, Claire. Got some questions from the room, actually. This one potentially is for you, Andy. Elena has said, can I please ask regarding letting properties? We have found that we will be at a loss of £500 a month if we let our house. This is an online calculator we've used, taking in consideration all the fees, insurances, etc.
I mean, that's not great. If you're at a loss of £500 a month.
It feels like that's almost impossible, Andy, right? With the way that rental prices are now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see or to hear what information you've been given in regards to rental price, obviously depending on what type of property you've got as well. What fees have you put into that calculator? And yeah, how it's all worked out, especially with the insurances as well. As the insurance amount correct? Now, look, I deal with clients on a daily basis that, unfortunately, where mortgage rates have increased and they've had to remortgage and they're spending, you know, £300 or £400 a month more than what they were before, because they had a good fixed rate previously, and they run at £100, £200 loss a month. But you've got to consider, you know, what is your plan on that? You know, if it's a long-term goal where you're going to have that property for the next 5 to 10 years, well, the capital appreciation on that property eventually will make up those losses that you've gained per month. If everything goes in the same direction with house prices that what we're seeing now, of course. But
Andy, Ellen has said that the mortgage is about 1,200, and she thinks the rent in the area is roughly 1,650.
Yeah. So if we look at the £1,200 a month for your mortgage and 1,650, I mean, if you look at a typical management service, let's look at our fees, for example. So a fully managed fee on 1,200 will be about £170 a month, inclusive of VAT. You've obviously got a tenancy setup fee to pay, which could be £700, but that's a one-off fee. So, you know, that's not an ongoing cost. Insurance is typically £30, £40 a month for an all-in-one insurance, for rent and legal insurance. Might get house insurance, but that's not a lot of money per month. So if you take that calculation of those sums that I've just given you, well, you shouldn't really be at a loss.
shouldn't be at a loss. Maybe the rent needs a review as well, because I always think with a calculator it's difficult to kind of put that into context.
That's why you need a professional person to speak to and give those comparables of what your property is actually worth. It's all very well seeing properties that are currently on the market.
Do you know any, Andy? Do you know any professional people that do that?
Yeah, I could think of one.
Definitely, Elena, definitely have a chat with Andy. He'll be able to give you a full breakdown, factual, financial detail of exactly what that would mean, and realistically what you're expecting to rent. Also be able to have a look at the property and see if there's some financial improvements that you may need to do as well. So yeah, if it's something you're seriously considering for your own personal reasons, 100% have a chat with Andy. He'll be able to help you out. But great questions and really appreciate them. Marta's asked one as well, actually. Maybe Sarah, more question for you here. We're looking at upsizing, but really struggling to find a suitable property. It doesn't seem like there's too much to choose from, sadly. Are you finding that at the moment, Sarah? Is there not much for sale? We know there's more coming to the market, but is there not much for sale?
I would say that things are selling quite quickly at the moment. So it's making sure that you are pre-registered. We have found majority of our properties actually this year have been sold before they've gone on to Rightmove and Zoopla. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're pre-registered so that you're getting the heads up. And actually, often because of the amount of interest that we found, viewings, we've had open or block viewing days go ahead prior to them launching onto the portals, onto Rightmove and Zoopla. So that is really important. I guess it would be good to know what area that you're looking in and what sort of price range that you're looking in. And I think with the upsizing type of properties, it's going to be a smaller market, because if you're looking at the sort of property that is going to be a forever home, you're not going to find people who are moving on as often as obviously that first time buy. But no, I would say in the past month, actually probably about 50%. Oh, sorry, I was just seeing.
She's just
there was something else written there, wasn't there?
Yeah, she's just saying, I should clarify, we're looking for a probate property type, not ready to move in.
Okay.
We're looking
so yeah, I suppose it's the specific type of property. So they're not going to be, especially if it's the probate property type, they're you're waiting for them to come available. So there won't be as many on the market, but they're there in the market. But I think that there is an awful lot of people that are looking for the same type of property, that it's just really important to, especially at that range, you're going to have, and I think at the 450 in Bracknell, because that is going to be the first time buyer market as well, with the stamp duty bracket. So I think it's just really important to get registered so that you're getting the heads up, because that sort of property will sell before it reaches Rightmove and Zoopla. Obviously from our side, checking the social pages is great, because the details will go out usually a week or two before they go onto the market. But also get to know your agent, because as soon as they know you and what you're looking for, as soon as they've sat down and found that property is coming to the market, they will contact you before it goes out onto the open market. So I think that's the best thing to do there.
Yeah, I would. There's obviously a reason why you're after a probate property, Marta, and that's potentially because you don't want an onward chain, or you're looking for a fixer upper, some sort of refurb. I wouldn't just put probate as the only option there. There's landlords selling properties where there's no chain, and the tenants have been in there for a long time and they need an upgrade, and they're happy to kind of sell those at a good price. There's people upsizing, that have been in there for many, many years, or moving or changing areas, and they need a little bit of work to do. The great thing about Bracknell at 450 is you're pretty much looking at those kind of 1960s properties. They might not have been touched for 30 years, some of those. So I would say chat with Ryan and Sanjay. Make sure you're on their socials. Facebook and Instagram is where you'll see the hashtag beat the portals. And like Sarah says, a lot of properties selling before portals. That hashtag beat the portals is about giving you on the socials, on Instagram and Facebook as our followers, the heads up on a property prior to it going live on the portal, so you can get the jump on it. And that's what I would say. Cindy, actually, that's watching as well, she's just highlighted for Eleanor that was talking about renting a property. Little plug here for the Investors Corner. Andy talks about that a lot on there, who's one of the co-hosts of that podcast. So the Investors Corner, you'll see that on Spotify and Apple. You can check that out as well. Claire, going to you with a question actually that someone wanted to ask privately, didn't want to kind of put their name to the question for reasons as we'll be able to see from the question here. What happens to my kids if I die without a will? I'm remarried and my kids are not in contact with their biological dad anymore.
Yeah, so for reassurance, it's not an uncommon question. It's one that we actually encounter quite a lot. Honestly, it is something that requires a confidential discussion just to understand the individual circumstances to give more specific advice, but as sort of just a broad understanding of the situation. So a will allows you to appoint what's called a legal guardian who will become legally responsible for any minor children in the event of your death. Now, something that's not fully known is that guardianship clause can only take effect when there is no other surviving parent with parental responsibility. Now, parental responsibility in the sense of fathers. So a father will have parental responsibility if he was married to the child's mother at the time of birth, and if they're listed on the birth certificate if the child was born after 2003, I think it was. So whether the father is involved in the child's life or not, they have parental responsibility, and if the mother was to pass away, that would automatically pass to the father. Now, that might be the legal stance, but practically that's not always the case. There are cases where fathers and mothers actually sometimes are estranged from their children, and even though they have parental responsibility, it wouldn't be necessarily appropriate for that parent to take on responsibility for the child. So there are some additional bits and pieces that need to be done in terms of the will, in terms of additional instructions as well, because ultimately until that actually happens, it's going to be down to your executors and your guardians to work together with the courts and get other legal advice at that time to make sure that the person that you want to look after the child has all of the legal authority to do so. So it's not simple, it's a bit complicated. That's sort of a very broad answer, but really if that's a situation that somebody is in, it's really, really important then that you come and speak to a professional like us. It's a completely confidential conversation. It's up to you where you want to take that conversation afterwards, but really every situation is slightly different and has slightly different advice. So as I say, for reassurance, we encounter this quite a lot. It's something that we know the sensitivity and how to handle it and have those discussions. So please do reach out to us and have a chat, because we'd love to discuss this in a bit more detail.
Still crazy, isn't it? The amount of parents that don't have a will in the UK.
Yeah.
You know, it blows my mind. I don't want to sound horrible here. I almost find it a little bit selfish when parents haven't got a will in place, to be honest, and they've got kids, because really it's important for the kids that you kind of set the expectations of what should happen, and we don't know what's around the corner. So I really feel quite passionately about that it's something, it should be a parent's responsibility to get done. And on that point, a lot of people often feel that you have to go to a solicitor and it costs thousands of pounds of a solicitor to get done, but it doesn't. And obviously Soteria, they're not a solicitor practice, but they are will writing specialists, so it's not a side hustle like it is for a solicitor. It's what you guys do, and it will be hundreds. Human
as well. We're human. Like, I'm a parent, I'm a separated parent, you know, and we're all family orientated. And as you say, in terms of the stats, I think the stats are something like 3 out of 5 parents don't have a valid will in place. And your children are your most valuable asset. So if you're not going to do it to protect your finances, do it to protect your children more than anything. You know, for parents, a will is more important for that than anything else.
If Andy and Sarah don't have wills, they're 100% getting them tomorrow after we've just gone through this chat. Right, Andy, back to you. Let's talk rentals. So there's obviously a lot of changes going on in the rental market. You can give us a 30-second summary on what some of them may be, but when do you think they're likely to happen? Is there a date in the diary? Are we panicking before we need to panic? talk to us about the changes, because it impacts tenants, it impacts landlords.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely going to happen. The Renters' Rights Bill, it's changed from the Renters' Reform Bill. You've got stuff in there that's potentially gonna be detrimental to landlords, but there's always a solution to the new things that come in, like a ban on upfront payments, longer notice periods to get your tenants out, specific reasons on bringing a tenancy to an end, no more fixed tenancies. It does sound all doom and gloom when I say it, but
when you say no more fixed tenancies, Andy, so most tenants would sign for like a 12-month tenancy.
Yeah.
That won't be a thing. Is that what you mean?
That won't be a thing anymore. So basically, when you agree a tenancy, it will just be on a rolling period. So that tenancy will continue on a rolling basis until either party serves notice. The tenant can still serve notice for whatever reason, but landlords need to be specific to a notice that they serve. So it's called a Section 8 notice. So Section 21s are going. And the Section 8 notice can be served to a tenant if you want to sell your property, if you need to move back in, or if the tenants are in rental arrears or antisocial behaviour. So there's still the option there to get your property back and end the tenancy. Most landlords end up selling their property or moving back in. That's the only reason why they normally end a tenancy. So you've still got that in place. But look, without going into it too much, yes, there are new things coming into play. It is going to happen. It's something that you can't really play games with. We just all need to get used to the fact that it is going to come into play. It's had its second reading on the 4th of February. It's got the committee stage probably in the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks. Now, normally when a second reading has happened, not much changes at the committee stage. So more than likely the stuff that we see now and are hearing now, it will come into place. There's been a few amendments that have been put forward in regards to the smaller type landlords with less than 5 properties and them having the ability to still serve a Section 21 notice. There's been uproar from landlords and tenants, and mainly tenants, about not being able to pay upfront rental payments, because if you look at referencing agencies and the way that they reference people, and I'll just look at one company, 30,000 of their tenancies last year were done on the basis of where a tenant needed to pay rent up front because they're coming from overseas, or they may have detrimental credit data. So for them to secure a property, the only way that they could do that is by paying rent up front for that security to a landlord, and also for referencing purposes. Now, what the government are trying to do is take that completely away. So those people that are coming from overseas and those people that need to offer that rent up front to secure a property, well, they'll no longer be able to do that. Well, what effect is that going to have? Well, if I'm a landlord and I haven't got that security and I can't reference them on any other basis, what am I going to do? I'm just going to move on to the next one. So it's mainly tenants that have done a bit of uproar on that side of things. So look, I'm sure there'll be little tweaks to certain things, not much, but there will be. So we'll see in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. And if the timeline of everything is that if everything goes through and the committee stage is in the next 3 to 4 weeks, then this will be implemented. D-Day will be around September, October this year. So it's going to happen quick. Now, whether there's a grace period or anything like that after it gets implemented, they haven't discussed that. All we've seen is that D-Day means D-Day, and it will be effective from that date.
So we're talking months, not years, and we're talking something which really is a total redo of the rental process. The tenant and letting process is a total redo, isn't it, really? And we'll have to see how that impacts existing tenants, and then is it new tenancies, existing, all of that aspect of things. But it's quite complex, so I do think it is something that is important. Marta's asked us a question here. Could you please clarify what happens if we accept an offer on a house but can't find anything suitable to buy for months? I wouldn't want to keep our buyers waiting too long, even if I was withdrawing from the deal and the buyer's losing money. That's my biggest worry. It's quite common, this, Sarah, isn't it? It's, when people want to sell, they want to move, but they can't find what they want. the chicken or egg scenario, isn't it? What advice would you give, Marta?
We've had this a couple of times in the last couple of months, actually, where people have come to us and said they want to put their house on the market, but they are looking for something specific and they are not going to move if they do not find that type of property. Just so happens that both of those people have found that type of property, and we've also got another one at the moment that is in the process out doing viewings. All we did with them is you've got to have transparency. There is no gain in having an offer from somebody who needs to move quickly if you're not in a position to move quickly. So we have made sure with people that are in that position that they're very aware of your situation, that you still need to find, that maybe, you know, if there's something specific that you're looking for, as there is, if you don't find it, then you will not move. So yeah, if it's somebody that's in a chain that needs to move within the next, you know, as soon as possible to keep that together, then they're not going to be the right buyer. But you will have people who are first-time buyers, for example, that are living with parents that if they really want your property will wait. We had one just before Christmas, and the people that offered on the property, they were aware that that was the stance of the seller. We met with the seller and with the buyer together, so we sat down all together so we could set some boundaries. And what we did was said, look, we're going to accept the offer because it was where everybody wanted to be. But we put a cut-off date of June, that if the seller hadn't found somewhere by June, they were all of the understanding that then the buyer may look for somewhere else. They were actually going to be in tenancy until December, so they had a year. So it meant then that if something was found by the seller in June, there was enough time for them to then give them notice to complete. But yeah, it's just being completely transparent so that you're getting the right buyer.
It's, and Marta's followed it up. It's not a silly question. It's a really common question. And yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. What we're finding at the moment is the flow of properties selling and coming to the market is quite high. But when you look at it as in a snapshot, there's not much for sale. For example, a lot of the agents at Avocado might have 5 properties for sale and 30 properties under offer. So there's been 35 properties in the last couple of months that they've listed, but the bulk of them are under offer. So the main thing is when you agree your sale to a buyer is that they understand it's subject to you finding, but also you're not just agreeing a price. Like Sarah says, you're agreeing terms, and one of those terms is timescales. So it's just being open and honest with the buyer to say, look, we need to find. Obviously, we're not moving out until we find, so please give us time. And if they are truly committed to your property, they'll wait. If for timescale reasons they can't, like Sarah says, they might have a tenancy coming to an end or something like that, then they're not the buyer for you, and we'll just find another one. So it is hard when you've not moved for 11 years. I totally get that, but that's the beauty of working with an agent, you know, like Ryan and Sanjay, one of the Avocados, is you can WhatsApp them questions like this in the evening, and you can kind of ask them directly without having to panic too much. So don't worry, we've got your back. And yeah, thank you again, Marta, for your questions, and everyone else that's interacted. Elena, thank you. Great questions. For the people that asked the estate planning questions prior to the show as well, for Claire, there's some really important, you know, kind of points that we've raised there. We'll be back next month for another show. It's the quarterly review. So we'll have the March review at the end of March. It'll be the quarterly one, which means we will be putting the quarterly one live on all socials. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. But if you've got private questions you want to ask us before, or you've got questions you want to ask us now off the back of this show, I think definitely Elena should speak to Andy. I think some of the people that have been asking the questions about estate planning should definitely get in contact with Soteria, or any parents. If you haven't got wills, speak to them quickly. Should do that 100%. Been a great episode. Claire, Andy, Sarah, thank you for joining me. Have lovely evenings, and we're back next month. Thanks for everyone that joined us.
Thank you.
Thank you.